Everyone, thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Line podcast today. We have Tyler Morrey, CEO of Upside.coop. Upside.coop is building a platform to power the ownership economy. Tyler, I'm so excited to chat with you, not only about your experience and your entrepreneurship journey, but also what you're building and really just the cool and complex ways that, you are kind of addressing your market and really excited to see what the effects of your platform will have as we kind of go into this evolution of influencer marketing and all these different types of things that maybe we didn't have in the last 5 years or we had, but it's kind of increasing the level of sophistication, the level of from other brands and other communities alike. So before we get into all that stuff though, what were you doing before you started the company?
Yeah. Well, first, Julian, thanks. Really, really appreciate you inviting me on. Ready to have a great time with you. Ready to have a great time with the audience. So let's dig in. What was I doing before? So yeah, I mean, I'm kind of a nerd. I like numbers. So my background's in finance. Specifically, I was doing company valuations. Yeah. More on the complex financial instruments side. Yeah. Complex capital structures, stuff like that. Worked with companies pretty much across the spectrum, right? Any given industry, small, big, public, private. But yeah, like that, I was just very deeply entrenched in equity and understanding the nuance.
Yeah. What are some ways in obviously, I think equity is kind of this weird shadow where we kind of know about it. Maybe we get it in our benefits or offer letters when we're signing up for a company, but what are the different nuances of equity that we might not know of? And some terminology that kind of helps set the stage for people to understand if they have equity into a company, what that even means and what it means to their kind of ownership of the work that they're doing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what it means, right? It means ownership. That ownership does take a lot of different forms though, right?
Yeah.
If I'm an employee and I'm going to get ownership in the company I'm working for, generally that's going to come in the form of stock options and or restricted stock units, right? Options are generally just a right to purchase stock at a later date with a fixed price, right? The interesting thing about that, and this is kind of where my background worked into it, right? I did a lot of what's called a 409A valuation, right? Which is a tax-based valuation, but is to be used for pricing options for a company being able to issue those options at the current value so that there's no tax implications. So I did a lot of that. The other thing, restricted stock units, that can also come in like a variety of forms. Keeping it simple though, generally that just means the right to receive a share at a later date. That's how you structure equity. But there are 1,000 different ways people can do that and throw in lots of different terms. Be important. Talk about vesting, why that is important to what it means to have ownership of your work and ownership in the shared success of the business. Right? Vesting is when you're given equity, it's not really yours yet. You got to earn it, right? And so generally vesting occurs with what they call a 1-year cliff, meaning you don't get anything if you leave in the first year. And then beyond that, vesting occurs incrementally over generally another 3 years, right? So total of 4 years. You earn everything that you were granted initially.
Yeah. And in thinking about the first, when we thought about the vehicle of startups giving out equity, a lot of us kind of think back to, it was kind of a way to maybe quote unquote underpay employees, but with the future promise of the success of the business. And it's a lot around not only VC capital kind of goes into play, what your users, what your targeted revenue, is it still seen as a way to say, I don't want to say underpay employees, but balance out the initial commitment of hiring somebody versus the long-term gains that they'll have at the company? Or are companies using it as a different vehicle altogether that has evolved from that initial purpose?
Yeah, it's an interesting thought because people view equity very differently. There's a pretty broad spectrum of what people think of when they hear that, right? Some people do go straight to is it a way to underpay the employees, right? Coming from a finance background, I like to think of things in terms of risk and risk to reward, right? And what it really means to get equity at a startup early stage, it's because a startup can't pay those salaries that Google or Facebook can, right? They can't pay you as much as you can get other places. They need the work, they need the help. And so equity is a way to compensate you for the risk that you're taking on, the risk in lower pay, but also the risk in instability, right? Because startups are absolute chaos. And so you have to have something there that brings people together, right? And that's why, I mean, that's why we use equity. Equity it's more than just getting a better price on someone's salary, right? Like equity is used to align everyone's incentives. It's used to bring order to the chaos, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right. It's used as retention. So it keeps people engaged and involved in the work that they're doing, and engaged and involved in the overall success of the business, and not just their own little corner of the world.
Yeah. And in regards to Upside, the catalyst, or I guess the inspiration behind the product and behind the company, what did you see out, especially with Web3 kind of becoming this whole thing that is so reliant on the people aspect, more so than customers, than anything? I think a lot of Web3 is really community forward. And then we see a lot of companies scramble on how to really, whether it's monetize that community, or if those words thrown out there, or foster that community, or build products to enable it. What was the catalyst for you to start a company like Upside.coop, where brands are now connected even more so with the community, and the community helps kind of foster and build the brand along their journey? What was the catalyst for that? And what kind of, how did you think of the mechanics early on?
There's two converging trends that really came together that as I started seeing both things happening, it's what catalyzed our little adventure that we are going on, right? Building Upside Co-op. The first thing is that, and this is kind of where Web3 comes into it, the idea of shared ownership started to become a lot more prevalent. People started talking about it, people started thinking about it, and people started getting really involved. And honestly, they got really excited. That's why we had such an outrageous hype cycle in Web3, and like prices shot through the roof. It's because people really liked the idea. But there's a lot of downsides. There's a lot of unsolved problems too.
Sure.
So I saw equity being used in novel ways was going to make more sustainable, more profitable, higher growth businesses, right? When it's not just employees, but as many stakeholders as you can involve, right? When your consumers and your customers, that community, your fans, everybody can get involved, can have that ownership experience, psychological ownership. They can feel the effects of what it means to know, when I do something good for this brand, it is something good for me as well, right? It also allows people to put more of their own identity into the brands that they love, because they actually are involved. They belong. Yet Web3, in all honesty, didn't do it the right. That is one of the biggest things that we saw, right? Like, as when you move beyond regular, what the rest of the world is going to recognize as crypto, right? Like ETH, Bitcoin, ETH as in Ether, the currency of Ethereum. That is its own closed system. Those things make a lot of sense. Then we started building all sorts of different products and protocols and things in Web3 across the spectrum of industries, right? Like, people said, hey, let's go out and buy a sports team together. Or let's all go out and let's co-own a golf course, right? There were a lot of movements to do this community ownership thing, and everyone looked past one of the, to me at the time, glaringly obvious errors in that thinking. It was that no one actually owned any of those things, right?
Yeah.
When you buy a token or an NFT, you don't have any ownership in the company that created that thing. And you know what? If the company says, hey, we're going to co-own something together, right? And then they sell you these digital assets. You take that money, you go out and you buy the thing. Legally, as it turns out, they're the one who owns that thing, not the community, right? And I know that because lots of friends, coworkers, colleagues, very deep in the space, they all desire the same thing. They want to co-own things, right? Like, they want to bring that value to community. There's been a lot of things in the way of making that happen, right? First and foremost being securities law, right?
Yeah.
So in seeing that there was so much potential in galvanizing community and empowering them through ownership. But that as we move into the real world and off blockchain, you want to use those same, I don't want to say tactics, but want to use those same motivators to drive value, to drive growth. But you can't do that if you're a retail business or you're direct to consumer or consumer application like a marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work like that. All the value accrues to your equity, and nothing's going to change that. And as soon as you try and transfer some of that equity or that value somewhere else, it starts looking a lot like a security.
Yeah.
Right? So me coming from the background that I did, working with complex instruments, seeing behind the curtain, the crazy things that finance people do, the crazy instruments they create that no one ever really knows about unless you're in that industry. I knew that there was definitely a way to do this, to do it right, to make sure that you could actually get real equity value ownership into the hands of the community. And that's where our journey really started.
Yeah. It's so fascinating to think about that real ownership. And I'm curious to learn, and I'm to the audience as well, what are the mechanics behind Upside Co-op? Tell us a little bit about the user experience. If I'm a user and I wanted to connect with the brand that is already connected to Upside, how is that relationship with the company that kind of co-owning or having some type of ownership or buying into the brand I'm using? Describe the mechanics a little bit more and what that user experience is like.
Yeah, we tried to make it as familiar of an experience as possible, right? To understand that you're going to participate in the same way that you participate with a brand every day, but that it's going to look a lot different this time. You're going to actually have ownership in that brand, right? So, how it starts, it's very brand directed, right? Like if I have a favorite apparel brand and they're participating, they're working with us, they're just going to have a link in your account on the app or on the website, right? And when you click that, you go through a very quick, seamless user journey that just takes you to a point where you can join the co-op, you can become a member, and then you could start earning ownership through all of the things that you already do, right? Like earn, and we denominate that ownership in points, right? It's important to know that those points are your ownership of the co-op itself, and the co-op does own that equity. And we can talk about cooperatives, co-ops in a bit, but finishing that user journey, how do you earn those points? The same way that any other brand is going to be giving you loyalty points right now, right?
Yeah.
You can earn it off your spend. I get 5 points per dollar every time I buy on the website. I'm getting a piece of ownership. I'm becoming an actual piece of this brand every time I buy their products. You can do it through social engagement, right? Likes on Twitter, reposting on Instagram, all sorts of different mechanics for helping spread the word. You could do it through referrals, telling your friends, your family, talking about creator economy, right? And like the influencer marketing boom that happened over the last decade. Like it has become increasingly more inauthentic. The interactions that these influencers have with their community, especially as their community, and I would rather say audience, as their audience continues to grow, it becomes less personal. And people buy things because they have personal connections, right?
Yeah.
So if you're a brand and you're thinking about what helps my brand grow, but grow as in get more customers, but also grow sustainably, right? Get customers that are going to believe in what we're doing, that are going to believe in our products, that are going to love our products, and they're going to keep buying, right? And the best way to do that is word of mouth. And you can't control word of mouth. That just happens because you get lucky, right? Maybe not anymore, right? Maybe you can use ownership, the true best incentive to guide your community along the path to word of mouth and sharing with their friends and family, the people who are going to buy it. And because they have those personal relationships, they're more likely to buy, they're more likely to participate, and they're more likely to stay.
Yeah. And describe, it's funny because I was part of a co-op, like grocery store in college. And it was pretty much just like if I shopped there, I was able to vote on things that they were going to stock. And then I would maybe earn some kind of benefit for being part of the community. And it gave me a lot of, I think, incentive to not only return to that grocery store, but also to think about what I'm consuming or purchasing even more intimately to my day to day and had this different level of attachment to this product. Why the co-op model? Does it run kind of systematically in that relationship to their customers? And what kind of rights, or I guess what kind of empowerment are you seeing the users of these different brands, the customers of these brands in their relationship with the brand that they're purchasing from? Describe the co-op model, please, and then describe its benefits to the customers overall.
Yeah. So a cooperative, right? The traditional general description of one is that it is an entity, an organization that is democratically owned and governed. Meaning the members of the cooperative, they're the ones who own it. They're the ones who make the decisions for it, right? And interestingly enough, because of that, they're also generally not considered securities, right? Like ownership in a co-op. And that's another topic, but that inherently it's why we use this model, right?
Yeah.
Because under every other statute, there's so many limitations on what can be done, how you can actually get ownership into the hands of people who don't normally get to have it, right? Like, how do you get ownership to stakeholders that are not your founders, your investors, your employees, right? That's what a cooperative helps a company to do, to share ownership with the people that also matter, that also have a lot of value to provide. And thing with Upside Co-op, right? Upside Cooperative itself is democratically owned and governed so that everyone has a voice. Everyone knows they have a voice. They get to participate not only in the upside, which is obviously important to us, but they get to participate in decision-making and laying the future of the organizations that they love and the brands that they participate with, right? And we add in another layer, which is very different, honestly, from the co-ops that most people are going to recognize, right? Like grocery stores, there's a lot of cooperatively owned grocery and other types of retail. BI, famously, one of the co-ops that most people know, a lot of people are members and they understand. I shop, and maybe someday at the end of the year, not maybe, but someday at the end of the year, I'm going to get a check in the mail and it's essentially a rebate for what I've purchased that year, right? But let's flip that and let's look at an early stage company, someone who really needs their community and someone who, as a community member, helps that company grow and become something, right? A rebate at the end of the year isn't that crazy, right? It's not as fun or enticing. But that's where we come in. That's why we called it Upside, because that's actually what you get, right? As a consumer, it's not just getting a little bit of money back at the end of the year for the purchases you made. It is real, true ownership in that company, in that brand. And if I am going to be a patron of a restaurant, right? And they have one location, it's around the corner, it's part of our neighborhood, part of our community. I'm going to eat there once, twice every day, maybe I'm going to give them my patronage. When they grow and they become thousands of locations across the country, one day, what you did for them at that early stage is incredibly meaningful, and you can actually get that level of reward for what you did and how meaningful it was, right? Like it can be not being bold or ostentatious, but it could be significant sums of money for some people, right?
Yeah.
Because I think it's something that we don't generally think about as much, how much consumers actually provide in terms of value for a brand, especially at an early stage. The co-op and the model that we use, which as a co-op, we can work with traditional companies who have growth trajectories and can become very, very valuable businesses. We can use the co-op to give their community a piece of that.
Yeah.
It is pretty different from traditional cooperatives, but it's something that's desperately needed because it's the thing that bridges the gap for what is community ownership. And in the real world, outside of Web3, what has been community ownership? That's been a cooperative. How do you bridge the gap for that to also being able to get upside in these brands and companies that you provide value to, but also that as you do that, everyone can grow together experience shared success.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the traction that you've had. You've been working on Upside for quite some time now, and tell us a little bit about the partnerships that you've created, the users that you have. What's exciting about what you've grown up till now, and what are you particularly excited about in the next kind of chapter of Upside Co-op?
Yeah. Right now, we've had a lot of wins. It's been quite an experience building. Obviously, you yourself as a founder, you know that, but we've been very lucky in building what we have. I'd say one of our first biggest wins was getting to partner with KPMG, the accounting firm, and Morrey, who's a very, very well-renowned law firm, in co-authoring a paper on the framework that we use, right, for cooperatives, where it is a company plus a cooperative. Yeah, that was incredibly important, but also just a great experience to work with people who are at the top of their field, right?
Sure.
And from that, we saw a lot of interest, right? Like there was a period there where we got calls all day, and there's still, obviously there's an educational curve to it, right? Like understanding how it's going to work and how to implement things. Obviously, we've gotten a lot better at that over the past few months, and that's resulted in some pretty big opportunities that we have in front of us. I mean, we've been talking with companies, in every industry. We've talked to Web3 companies who we're providing a solution that helps them solve for some of the issues that they have in Web3. We're talking to companies, traditional companies, startups, clothing and apparel brands, cookie companies, pretty much all over. Anyone who's got a good community and they've got users that are real fans, they're interested in using ownership as that mechanism to really drive and empower those people to do more and to help build something together. It's still a story being written. We actually launching initially our first 8 customers here in the beginning of April. So we're really excited to see how that goes. But there's certain things that we already know. We already know, because there's been plenty of academic studies, papers from Columbia Business School and from KPMG as well, on what it can mean to use ownership. One thing we know, consumer behavior. When someone buys a share right in a public market of a company, if they're already a consumer, they generally increase their brand spend by 40%, right?
40%.
Wild. Yeah. Get this, how much someone increases brand spend if they're like converted as a normal consumer to a loyalty program member?
Now, how much?
18. So it is more than double the ROI if they buy the stock themselves. Now, if they earn it, right? So if they earn it, if they're granted that stock, right? Like they don't have to go out and buy it. If they're granted that, it's 100%. So they're going to double their brand spend, right? It's 5 times more effective in terms of generating growth and loyalty than a traditional loyalty program. Other things we know, when people have ownership, they refer way more, right? Like 58% increase in referrals. They're going to be retained as customers for much longer. They're more loyal. But just generally, there's also like that unsaid piece of all of it, right? Like the brand story, the narrative, that also just a ton of interaction and engagement, right? The ability to go out as a brand and say that our community is not just our community is us. The community has become something more, right? Like we like to say over here in the office all the time, we're trying to change business to consumer to business and consumer, right? B2C can become B and C, because that can create much more profitable, much more sustainable businesses, and you can do it because the community wins.
Yeah, it's fascinating to hear the numbers that are so surprising in terms of people really do care to be attached to products, not only be evangelists about things that they enjoy and or are high quality, but also I think even beyond that, what a company stands for. It's even more so of an incentive from a consumer standpoint, and even for those that are referring to that, to get involved in what that's going on. Because I don't know about you, but I think we all want to be the first to do something, the first to buy a certain product, to be a part of someone's story, to know the journey. There's a lot of I don't want to like nostalgia in that there's just a lot of attachment to that. And I think we all get a lot of satisfaction from that experience. But I'm curious with Web3, with communities being still kind of, I don't want to say new, but in terms of how they're being fostered and nurtured is a little bit nuanced. What are some of the biggest challenges that you face today?
I think some of the biggest challenges, not only we face, but that are faced generally, Web 2, Web 3, anyone trying to build community is creating the funnel, right? It's getting that conversion cycle, and not converting customers to customers. It's about converting customers to fans.
Yeah.
Right? That is a difficult thing to do. And there is generally no playbook for that, right?
Yeah.
Our thesis, which we think is hopefully pretty strong, is that if you can take those customers and meet them where they're at and convert them into fans by converting them first into owners, right? Meeting them at the loyalty program level. Say, just like any other company with a loyalty program that you've engaged with, it's going to be that easy. It takes that much of your time, but this time it means something very different, right? When the customer can have that experience, right? To be just going through the motions of joining another loyalty program, but then get to understand what that means at the end when they just finished their purchase, they checked out, and they joined, and they see those points drop and know that they now own a piece of that business as the cooperative. That can be incredibly powerful. And it can change. It can change how a consumer views that brand, views that company, right? The first step that is just vastly important, one thing that is overlooked, is not about just nurturing the fans. It's about creating them, right?
Right.
Now, once you've done that, nurturing fans, there's a 1,000 different ways to try and engage with the community.
Yeah.
And, that we leave that up to the brands to decide, right? Like we are just the ownership backbone.
Yeah.
But we also feel like it provides you a much stronger foundation to continue to nurture them, right? Because they have a vested interest. It's serious business now, right?
Yeah.
And that was the promise of Web3. I think that it's to no fault of anyone in the industry that hasn't been what's been delivered. It's not what people have actually gotten, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing that we're trying to change.
Yeah. If everything goes well, what's the long-term vision for Upside Co-op?
Man, I have no idea, dude.
Good answer.
It is a long-term vision. I mean, I've got plenty of wild dreams and ambitions. But long-term vision, the mission, what we actually want to accomplish, right? Like that's just changing the paradigm. It's changing. I want to see something be adopted across the board, right? I want to see a world in which the ownership that you share with your community becomes competitive advantage.
Yeah.
The way that you engage with them, how much they get, becomes competitive advantage. See a world in which we all start recognizing the power of the consumer, the value that they do create. And I honestly just want to see what comes from that. I just want to see what kinds of brands can be built when people in mass turn into fans from just customers, when you can convert customers at a much easier rate. Right, like that's another wild statistic that I missed earlier. But this is from KPMG. 3 in 4 consumers would switch to a product at a brand with a better loyalty program.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. And when you let that sink in, that 3 out of the 4 of your potential competitors and the customers of your potential competitors would be willing to switch, right? First thing is you have to, therefore, how do you prove that it's a better loyalty program, right? How do you differentiate your loyalty program from someone else's? I know how. You give them ownership, right?
Yeah.
Like that is how you differentiate, right? But like, that's the world I want to see. That's the world we at Upside Co-op want to see. We want to see people taking advantage of that, brands taking advantage of that, and showing that any brand, if they actually care about their community, that they can grow a lot faster, and a lot better than most of us have ever really thought could be possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I love the next section. I call it my founder FAQ. So I'm going to hit you with some rapid fire questions and let's see where we get. First,
let's do it.
First question is, what's particularly hard about your job?
It's everything is hard about my job. But the hardest thing for me, like personally, has been like, sometimes you just have to pick up and do whatever's in front of you. And you never know what's coming across the door or across the threshold. But I've spent over the last 2 years an inordinate and mind-numbingly boring amount of time reading law. And to the point where I at least, now I can actually speak to it, right? And like, I can talk to what's important, but like, that's not something I really expected, right? Yeah. I didn't realize that attorneys can't innovate for you. You have to do it yourself.
Yeah.
What's the other thing, and I think most founders would agree, well, maybe most mediocre founders like me would agree, sometimes you just have no idea what to do. That's the hardest part.
Yeah.
Like, where do I put my time?
Yeah.
What is going to be effective? How am I going to build this thing?
Yeah. Well said.
Hard questions.
Yeah. Yeah. And another thing that kind of pops into my mind, being that cooperative, Upside Co-op has this whole, this old form of ways to connect to a company or industry or product, thinking about the cooperative model, but adopting kind of a new technology around it that almost, it accelerates the ability to do so. But it's so new and nuanced that there's some challenges in communicating the story and the value. What's a challenge that you didn't expect that you see reoccurring in helping companies, for other founders out there, kind of adopt an old form of doing something, connecting with customers in a cooperative way with new technology and kind of building that trust that old form will be accomplished with this new form of technology? What are some challenges that you can speak to that other founders might also have in regards to helping clients adopt to something that's old, but with new technology?
I think there's obviously a lot of disconnects between something truly new and innovative and the way the way things work now. And then there's like a third layer when you're saying, hey, let's do something new and innovative, but it's also something that isn't what people do now. It's what people have been doing for a long time and used to do. And it's not really something that's relevant to your industry right now, right? Mostly just corn growers in Iowa that do co-ops. Yeah, I think the important thing as a founder is to recognize when there's a communication disconnect.
Yeah.
When that means that there's a problem with your product and your service and that you need to fix it, or when it is just an educational thing, right? I give an example. Earlier on, as we were building things out, we were going to try and set up co-ops for everybody.
Yes.
Right. And I was trying to tell our data clients like how this was going to work, how they were going to run another company on top of their company. Right. And although after a while, a couple of 1-hour Zoom calls, they start getting it. It takes too long. And in the end, it's also just a massive amount of work for them to be able to do that. Right. So it's an example of a time when I recognized that just breaking that education barrier, if the barrier is too hard to break through, it means that there's probably something wrong with the product and the service. And so we went back to the drawing board. We spent a lot of time with our attorneys figuring out how can we take over the operation of the co-op for them too, right?
Yeah.
Like, how can we do all of that? How can we handle the tax implications? How can we handle paying out to users? How can we handle the equity piece too? Make it as simple as possible, right? And we went from trying to set up an entire company secondary to someone else's company to in a week, I can give you 2 agreements. You can fill them out. We can sign them and we're ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And that, I think I say it's an important thing and a difficult thing to recognize because it took us a long time to figure that out.
Yeah.
Not just to figure out how to do it like that, but to figure out that that's what we needed to do. That's what the market was telling us because of that huge educational disconnect.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so fascinating to think about just once you're able to get these companies online and operating with the co-op, the advantages. And as you said, if somebody has ownership or the rewards program has ownership into a company, it's almost 100% likely that they'll buy another more product and increase their purchasing habits. And you mentioned some more about people would change even the products that they're purchasing if they have an incentive better at other companies. If you can quickly describe a couple other benefits that companies will receive in you mentioned the tax implications a second ago, but how can companies think about building a cooperative and fostering this community in ways that it'll actually benefit their business outside of the outcomes of increased consumer behaviors? What are some other benefits that they can expect?
There's a lot of benefits. A lot of them are about just building a better business and, about the community getting a piece of that. Other benefits, huge benefits for founders, is the image that your community has of you, right? That you're not like, you're not just this dirty capitalist, that you actually care.
Right.
That's a huge thing, right? And that's a hurdle that is so difficult to jump for so many founders, because all consumers inherently understand that, like, your goal is to make as much money off of me as you can.
Yeah.
I really love your stuff, so I'm going to root for you, right? But like, that's your goal. Sports teams are the best example of that, right? Like, the fans love nothing more than being there because of the value they get out of just being a fan. In the end, the sports team's whole goal is we want to, take from you. Well, what if we change that? And what if we say, we're not just going to take from you, we're going to give, and you're going to get out of this what you put in, right? As a user, as a consumer, the more that you create value for us outside of just buying things is important too. But outside of your purchases, what else are you going to do that's going to provide value as a fan, right? And now, that situation is just drastically different from what it used to be. You have a completely different relationship with the fans and consumers of your brand. I think that, honestly, it's hard to say whether or not the monetary benefits are better or not. Because like, that's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah. The insights, and I think most founders can appreciate the insights you get from your customers, even your early adopters, and how they help shape and mold your brand and your product. It is insurmountable in terms of brainstorming session or testing or doing focus groups or anything like that. It's that connection and that feedback loop that really, you can hear 200 episodes that we've done. Founder after founder talks about that relationship and how important it is. And it's amazing to see. I know we're coming to the close of the episode, but I always love to ask this question because I love how founders extract knowledge out of anything that they consume, whether it was early in your career or now. What books or people have influenced you the most?
Honestly, podcasts.
Yeah.
Right. Like, that is because I have a 55-minute commute every day because we come into the office. I like to think it's because we like each other, because at least I do. I like everybody.
Yeah.
And I like being around that. I like the atmosphere and I like working together, but that is a long drive, and that's 55 minutes there and it's 55 back. I have a lot of time. Can't be reading because I'm driving. So I listen to podcasts. Who has been instrumental, or just maybe just say influential in my journey as a founder, where I've gotten a lot of knowledge from? It's been all over the place. Lots of industry podcasts. I listen to lots of Web3 podcasts because that's the front lines of what it means to build this new type of community. Seed Club podcast, which is called Building at the Edges. Incredible. Jess Loss, also just a very enjoyable host to listen to. Acquired, listening to the stories of other mega companies, just incredible brands throughout history. That is always just incredible to listen to. Just to hear their story, the things that you can actually get from that story is kind of astounding.
Yeah.
Because I learned so much just hearing what it's been like for other people. And then also for everybody listening, Behind Company Lines, incredible podcast. I've learned so much.
I love it. Thank you for the plug, and I appreciate it. And one thing that we really love to talk about is current events. What are founders dealing with nowadays? And I love those other podcasts. I love podcasts like How I Built, but I'm more interested in people like yourself who are in the trenches, building, adopting new products, learning from their customers, and really kind of going, or I guess it's like taking a step back in time, but in the present tense. So I appreciate that. And last little bit is I always like to give our founders a chance to give up their plugs, let us know where we can find and support them. But before we do that, if there any question that I didn't ask you that you would have liked to answer that I should have asked you, anything come to mind?
Oh, no, nothing comes to mind. That's only going to happen after we're done.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Well, Tyler, give us a chance to learn more about you. Where can we find you? Where can we support the product? If I'm a company looking to connect with my community that I've fostered, where can I find Upside Co-op? And where can I find you as a founder? Give it to your LinkedIn's, your website, your Twitters. Give us all your plugs.
Yeah, no, Twitter at Upside Co-op. Twitter for me at Tyler Morrey. My DMs are open. Hit me up. I just like talking with everybody. Plus, by nature of what we do, I get to talk to founders all the time, which is super fun too. Obviously, you know that.
Yeah.
Best place to find us. Best place to get the conversation started. Upside.coop. Right? It's in the name. Tried to make it as easy as possible. So Upside.coop, that's Upside.coop, no dashes. There's an interested form, fill that out. We'd love to chat with everybody. Right now, we're just all about getting communities involved. And so, easiest place. I instead of all of the thousands of places that you could probably find us, I would just say, just go to the website. Just fill out the form. Just come talk to us. Keep everyone going through the same direction. Otherwise, who knows?
Crazy.
Anyways, I really appreciate it. This has been such an absolute joy to hang out with you and chat and get to share our story.
Amazing, Tyler. It's been such a pleasure for me learning about your experience, what you're building, and sharing this with the audience. I hope you enjoyed yourself, and thank you again for being on Behind Company Lines.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course.